At the start of the 20th century, one of the most famous and beautiful women of the American stage and screen was a man named Julian Eltinge. Welcome back to Yesterqueers. My name's Amanda, and I'm a public historian of queer history. Quick note, if you're in Los Angeles this Monday, October 6th, you can join me for a screening of one of Eltinge's films, followed by a panel discussion and Q&A. All right. Back to the history. Julian Eltinge is often described as America's first drag queen, but that's not right for a few reasons. Eltinge was a female impersonator, or an illusionist, as he described his art. Julian Eltinge was born in Boston on May 14, 1881, as William J. Dalton, the only son of Joe and Julia Dalton. He got his first foray into the theater when his mother entered young Billy into baby pageants, where he won blue ribbons. This was a time in U.S. history where there was very little distinction between the clothing for baby boys and baby girls. Pretty much all babies wore dresses. Eltinge's family moved around a lot when he was a child, and he used to brag that he had been to every state except Maine by the time he was a teenager. Much to his father's chagrin, all of the moving around did not dim Billy's desire to perform. He used to sing for guests in the parlors and lobbies of boarding houses and hotels where they stayed. For the few years that the family was settled down in Butte, Montana, Eltinge spent as much time as he could soaking up all of the theater and opera that was available in the city. Eltinge's family was back in Boston by the time he was a teenager, and he worked a series of jobs while he took dance classes and voice lessons and tried to figure out how to break into theater. He even worked at a milliner's shop for a while where, according to his biographer Andrew Eldman, the young Eltinge developed a taste for the beautiful. Billy Dalton, soon to be Julian Eltinge, got his big break with the 1st Corps of Cadets of the Massachusetts Volunteer Militia. Now, you might be wondering what the National Guard's oldest militia unit has to do with theater, but they had a big giant armory building that was constantly in need of repair and upgrades, which they financed with big giant theatrical productions with all-male casts. Eltinge wasn't a cadet, but he talked his way into the cast of Milady and the Musketeer, which went up at the Tremont Theater in Boston on February 5th, 1900. His star rose steadily from there. Not only could Eltinge dance well and sing in what was described as a velvety contralto, he embodied the female characters that he was playing so completely that many audience members didn't believe he was a man until he took his wig off at the end of the performance. Julian Eltinge went from starring in cadet theatricals to performing privately for Boston's elite, to vaudeville, to Broadway, and eventually to film. Meanwhile, Billy Dalton turned himself from the uneducated son of a barber to a Harvard graduate who'd studied architecture and spoke fondly of his days in the Hasty Pudding Club. Julian Eltinge performed femininity on stage, and Billy Dalton performed masculinity in his private life. He smoked and drank, he wore immaculately tailored suits, and he talked about the stock market. And he was notorious for getting into and winning fistfights with anyone who suggested that he was anything other than a straight man. Eltinge is a fascinating historical figure because he both subverted and reinforced the gender binary. We have no idea what kind of people Eltinge was interested in romantically or sexually, because there are absolutely no historical records of him ever having a partner of any kind. He may have been asexual, he may have been celibate, he may just have been very discreet. He was famously engaged to another vaudeville performer named Eva Tange for a while, but they basically just did that for publicity and they never married. In 1920, he traveled to Japan with another vaudeville performer named Lauren Bullivant, and he identified her as his wife, but that wasn't true. So we don't know. And the press at the time couldn't figure it out either, so they took to calling him ambisextrous. What we do know is that Julian Eltinge captivated audiences around the world. At the height of his career, he was one of the highest paid performers of his day, out-earning even Charlie Chaplin. He was the face of corset advertisements and a line of skincare. He even had a Broadway theater named after him. It's now the AMC on 42nd Street, but you can still see Eltinge in this mural over the escalators. That's him on the right. Unfortunately, like so many performers, Julian Eltinge's career fell off a cliff in the 1930s. After the stock market crashed and the country was plunged into the Depression, not only did people have less money and leisure time to devote to going to the movies or vaudeville shows, there was also a new conservatism sweeping the U.S. that targeted queer people and, by extension, performers that transgressed gender boundaries. We're going to talk more about that second part throughout the rest of this month. At the end of his career, Eltinge was relegated to performing in smaller nightclubs, some of which required that he perform in men's clothes while displaying his wigs and costumes on stage next to him. Julian Eltinge died of a stroke on March 7, 1941, while he was in New York City in the middle of a run of shows at Billy Rose's Diamond Horseshoe. He was just 59 years old. That's it for today. As always, more information, including sources and further reading, is available in the usual place.